record away and all that good stuff, I'm good with that.
Sounds good. Okay, so what I kind of want to do is explain a little bit what I'm doing here.
Okay.
So I'm graduating as an environmental interpreter. So like I want to work at like in the national parks and do the programs that teach kids about things. And one of the things that my group noticed was that a lot in what we had to go through in our School of Environmental Science, we learned a lot about history, but it was a very whitewashed history, like
Right.
things always seem to be. Um, and we have lots of land management classes and land use classes and policy classes, but they almost never touch on anything having to do with anything Native American. So what we want to do is get some input and see, okay, what would be some good things to teach about? Well, even if like teachers offer extra credit activities, what things would be good to help sort of, the college population learn a little bit more.
Okay.
So that's what we're doing. So I just have some questions for you.
Okay.
And I guess the first one I'm going to start with is, who are you and what tribe are you affiliated with?
Okay. So my name's Jack Holland. I'm a enrolled member of the Cherokee tribe in Northeast Alabama. I also have family from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, which is the Lakota Oyate people from up there, Sioux Indian, for folks who don't, have some understanding of the different tribes. So, and that's who we are. I live here in Georgia.
Okay. And then, so you've always been a part of them then?
I was actually raised among my Lakota family,
Okay.
and recently found out after I say recently, my mom's been dead since 2004, but we found out after she passed away that we had Cherokee blood from her. So we went and we didn't even know, grew up not knowing anything even about that. So we went and did the research on that and everything. And then one of the tribes out in this area, their state recognized tribe, it's they've forever, I've been running around with them because I lived here, for the longest time. And, ended up, saying, hey, you guys, and they had open enrollments and all this other stuff. So boom, 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 one thing led to another. And so I signed with them because they're one of the only like about 5 or 6 in our area of
Okay.
tribes, state recognized tribes, because we only have one federal tribe, and that's down in South Alabama. That's, anywhere close. You got Cherokee, North Carolina, and then you've got another federal reservation down in Mississippi and Philadelphia of Choctaw people.
Okay.
So the state tribes tend to do a lot.
Okay. So yeah, I didn't know there was even a difference between state and federally recognized.
State tribes, basically, the easiest way to put it is state tribes are people made up of people who don't meet federal minimum blood quantum requirements of the federal tribes. Most federal tribes, you got to be quarter blood or half blood to be able to become a member of the tribe. Most state recognized tribes is find one single ancestor as far back as you can, and as long as you can trace that person on paperwork, get a legitimate genealogist to do the work and certify it.
Right.
And you find them on one of the many, many rolls that were taken, like the ones that Senator Dawes come up with back in the 1800s, the Dawes rolls and all that stuff. There was a lot more taken than that one. You know what I mean? There's tons of them, but political stuff being what it is back in the day, some rolls are accepted, some are not, by the federal tribes. So state recognized tribes there's like 87 state recognized tribes in the United States.
Okay. So
And
those are more common, yeah.
Yeah. There's over 500 federal tribes. You know what I mean? But, state recognized tribes, we still have a voice in like the American Indian Congress, which is a big meeting on Native American affairs and stuff that happens every year. We're allowed to be there because we're still legally by the United States government, we're considered, Native American people. We can, the 1990 Craft Act, Native American Arts and Crafts Act, we can label our work as Native American made, whereas if you're not Native American, it's a felony offense to label your work as Native American. It's considered cultural appropriation and false advertising.
Right. And you guys can also, one thing we learned about is like you guys are the only ones that can legally have bald eagle feathers unless, you gift them to other people.
Well, actually, right now, state recognized tribes don't have any access to the National Feather Repository.
Hmm.
And there's some precedent set in court about that. A group of white folks that live and follow Native American ways a few years back won the right because of their religious beliefs, freedom of religion, to access the National Feather Repository because the feathers were considered essential to Native American belief systems. But as it stands right now, state tribes do not have access to the National Feather Repository, nor can federal tribes or anybody else who does have access to that National Feather Repository. They're not allowed to give away the feathers. They can give it away, but like if a federal indigenous person gave you an eagle feather, you can still be in trouble for being in possession of that feather without paperwork and DNA tagging on the feather from the National Feather Repository. And a lot of federal tribes are fighting for the right to be able to give feathers away with, maybe a piece of paper from the tribe itself, because there's honors that are given to people, outside folks. Several presidents have been to reservations where they were, ceremonially presented with feathers, but, technically they weren't allowed to keep them. You know what I mean? Because they can't be in possession of those items. So, it gets a little sticky, but there's a lot of court stuff going back and forth right now in federal court determining who has the right to possess feathers, who has the right to give feathers, and that's all goes back to the 1903, Migratory Bird Act that keeps you from, having any type of feathers outside of pretty much chicken and turkey feathers.
Right.
Yeah,
You can
because
have guineas as well. Any game bird.
yeah, any game bird you can possess.
But
Even
then that's state to state too, because there's
Yeah.
certain states where you can't have turkey feathers.
Yeah, certain states don't allow you to possess turkey feathers either.
Yep.
At least not turkey feathers for resale. And a lot of people in the powwow scene, paint turkey feathers and do artwork on them. And, among the Cherokee people, turkey was an incredibly important bird. It was equal to the eagle.
Right.
When the country was founded, they had an argument whether the turkey was going to be the national bird or the bald eagle. You know what I mean? And bald eagle won out, but that's how important the turkey was to southeastern tribes. So it just a lot of
Well, it was
court
a lot
cases.
of it was a better food source. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, the bald eagle. People don't like to hear it, but the bald eagle is a scavenger bird. It's not any different than a vulture, really.
Right.
It's just more majestic looking, and doesn't have that ugly thing on its chin, the wattle, and all that junk. So they like it because of its majesty and big fierceness. But really, the turkey is a much more practical, animal in regards to a tribal existence or sustainable existence.
Right. So one thing that's constantly, at least today in today's culture, is everybody wants to be politically correct. People don't want to offend anybody. So the terms Indian, Native American, and Indigenous peoples have all been used. So in your mind, is there anything wrong with any of those? Are there ones that you would prefer over others?
Really, with me, and this is an individual thing, I can't speak for any other Indigenous human being but myself.
Mm-hmm.
I do not find, to me, as long as the conversation's being had, I don't care really what I'm called, because the conversation's being had, then I can educate if education needs to happen. You know what I
Right.
mean? I mean, you really want to be the most politically correct. You can't ask somebody what nation they're in. If they tell you they're Salagi, which is Cherokee, then, that's a Salagi person, not a Native American, not an American Indian, not an Indigenous person. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You know,
So
the
by
best,
tribe. So like if they're
yes.
Cherokee or Hopi. Okay.
Yeah, because, to just say you're Native American or, North American Indigenous or whatever the term might be, it's still homogenizing Indigenous people into a clump. Just saying,
Okay.
I don't know the amount of people that come, can you say something in Indian for me?
Right.
And I'm like, I don't speak any of the Hindi languages, and they get all confused on me. But it's like, I can speak, Lakota, I'm learning the Salagi language. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Want to hear something in Lakota or a little bit in the Cherokee language, I can oblige you, but I just can't speak Indian for you. There is
Right.
no Indian. And that's the problem with any type of generalized or generic term. It erases identity from people. And that's really the issue. And people are just wrapped up in the wrong concept of what they're being mad about. You know what I mean? Like, folks, well, I want to be politically correct. Well, if you want to be politically correct, then be correct in asking somebody, don't be afraid to ask a question. That's the other problem. A lot of people get sensitive. I'll walk up to somebody I think is Indigenous. What nation are you?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And if they get offended at that, I'm sorry, I was looking for information. And I don't believe just because somebody got offended, I'm in the wrong.
Right.
It goes both ways. You can be overly sensitive to things too. And I think people should, request that they be referred to by their nation. So,
Okay.
but again, again, that's my personal
Right. Yeah.
concept, and not anything that I'm speaking for anybody else. You know what I mean? Because you'll hear different concepts from different indigenous people on that.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, beliefs and everything else
Hmm.
are, tribe even. So,
Exactly.
okay.
Where one tribe, the guys, carry owl feathers. They go into the next tribe, and that's a big no-no to have an owl feather there.
Right.
That kind of thing. So.
Okay. So, a lot of the things in the news have been, about pipelines, and that's where we most often is hear about Indigenous people and pipelines affecting tribal lands. Has any of this affected you or anybody in your tribe?
Well, in the biggest concept of it, the pipeline, just they're overall a bad thing. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Even
from
as an outsider,
environmental
it's just an
standpoint,
environmental issue. Yeah,
100% with you
you
on
know,
that one.
yeah, they're a bad concept. And I try to be really non-biased about things. I understand too, the amount of jobs lost, to common people by shutting down pipelines. I understand that as well. You know what I mean? The world is so messed up, but I also turn around and say, if you're driving a car to work, you really can't yell about pipelines too much, because the gas
Right.
in your car that you paid for and helped fund that pipeline fueled your car up. You know what I mean? So, at what point do we, stop patting ourselves on the back for our, environmental awareness by the little things we do and start doing something meaningful? And I say, shut the pipelines down, find alternative energy. As far as it's affecting me, other than just the conversations that I have with people, especially non-Indigenous people who feel the pipelines being shut down is unjust, I have some tense conversations about that, because most of the people that I talk to, they're more financially motivated in the world. Their belief system almost just comes from, well, if it makes money, then it's good, blah, blah, blah. I don't know really how to describe that the best I can, but,
No, that's fine. Yeah.
I've got this thing where, and among the Lakota people, yeah, the pipelines, affected, Standing Rock. You know what I mean? We all
Right.
remember the big complete blowout at Standing Rock, where, I felt that whole movement, but I also saw too many non-Indigenous people involved. You know what I'm saying? Coming up there to get their street credit, so to speak.
Right.
In the environmentalist movement or the social justice warrior movement or whatever the thing is that they're a part of, that they feel being around the Indians and fighting for the land gives them some sort of credibility as a human being. And then the mess that was left behind up there when all the people left.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I saw. It's one thing to be like, "Hey, I'm here to help," but you still need, if you're trying to protect the earth, you need to be a good stewardess of the earth.
Exactly. And that just, so I've got
Because
mixed
numbers
feelings.
help, but only if they actually help and don't do damage.
Right. And then, the concepts that were taken over. I mean, I'm not going to try to advocate violence, but there was a time in that Standing Rock situation where the people should have stood up instead of just getting bombed and blown apart and doing weird stuff. They should have stood up and fought back. It worked in 1973 at the Wounded Knee
Mm-hmm.
occupation, and that's been pretty much the only time Indigenous people get a voice or noticed by anything. You know what I mean? We got to get up and get angry and get rowdy so people can go look at those, pissed off Indians.
Right.
And it shouldn't take that. And so, I'm not entirely sure what the concept is or what we need to do, but I agree with shutting the pipelines down. But the problem with that they need to find some other thing to fill that void though. That's left by that, because it's jacking gas prices up. It's doing all kinds of things around the country that's affecting, the Indigenous people as well as non-Indigenous people. And
Right.
unfortunately, we're all floating around in the same problem, regardless of our race. You know what I mean? Because without the environment, it doesn't matter what race we are.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another reason that I'm in this field because I mean, teaching future generations, you know what I mean, will help in the long run. Like,
Yes.
yes, it sucks that it's not going to help it right now, but I mean, I do lots of work with the Boy Scouts and stuff. So even teaching forestry and like, hey, even though this is biodegradable, it shouldn't be in the forest. Like it's not, you know what I
Right.
mean? And
Yeah.
just so yeah, so that's yeah, I definitely feel that. And
Was yesterday. The second best time is today.
Yeah. My wife just said, the old quote, the best time to plant a tree is yesterday. Second best time is today.
yep.
you know. So environmental consciousness, and that should be at the forefront of everything regarding Indigenous people. There's just so much fighting over, you know, people worrying about cultural appropriation and things like that. I tend not to worry about that so much because I believe that, one, I'm a very spiritual person. I'm a non-Christian. You know what I mean? So I
Mm-hmm.
believe very deeply in the old ways of stuff. And I believe that those spirits take care of themselves. I don't have to sit here and yell at somebody. I can educate and talk to somebody and then let it be. You know, because people are going to do what they're going to do. And people are like, well, it's cultural appropriation. I'm like, well, if somebody sees a white guy doing something and thinks it's real, you probably don't want that person hanging out with you anyway if they're not willing to get educated.
Right.
You know what I mean? You know, and it's a matter of just be an educator. Be there to say, you know, here's what's real, here's what's not. You know, this is a, you know, inappropriate, this is offensive, and be able to articulate why it's offensive. Not just, you know, you don't get to be offended just because you don't like something. You need a reason why, a way to make people understand. Because if you can't make people understand, you create division, and division creates a fight, and a fight is what we have in society right now. And I'll swear up and down, both sides of any argument right now I see, both of them tend to be wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and how they're handling it and how they're going about it. You know what I mean?
So another thing with that cultural appropriation, so this is something that a lot of times gets very cloudy, and I'm going to say for me that there's some points that it gets cloudy for me. Like when I was 4 years old, Pocahontas was my favorite Disney princess, you know, wanted to be just like Pocahontas.
Right.
And recently I shared a flashback photo of me dressed like Pocahontas, mind you, the princess, not just a Native American. And I got so much retaliation, and I was like, to me it was like dressing like Cinderella. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's not like I just wore her dress and that was
Mhm.
it, you know?
Yep.
But, and then also, so my camp has something called a frontiersman program where we learn about, you know, the men that, you know, founded the frontier, you know. We're going along, we learn lots of, stories about, you know, how they interacted with the Indians and different things. I'm sorry, with the Native Americans and different things like that. And so we learn a lot about that stuff. And so recently I actually was in a shop and bought a medicine bag that was, you know, Native American made, turtle shell, had raccoon fur on the back. And I was like, oh, this will be great when I go up on the hill and do this stuff. And the lady immediately saw me and was like, oh, that's not going to be for your cell phone, is it? I'm like, no, like, I respect your culture. So it's also like, you know, you see dream catchers everywhere and everything. So when you were saying, like, what is okay and what is not okay, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it's not okay to, you know, go read a book or see a movie and talk to one person or talk to people till somebody tells you what you want to hear already and
Mm-hmm.
verifies what you already want to do. So you have a justification. It's not okay to do any of those things and then go out and try to do ceremony for people. You know what I mean? And
Right.
things of that nature. That to me is what cultural appropriation is about. Buying a medicine bag in a store, one, you can't complain about what a person uses something for when you sell it to the public.
Right.
You cannot sell something to the public and then complain about appropriation. Okay, that is not normal.
Right.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense to me. Uh, Appropriation to me is when you're doing something that's detrimental to the culture as a whole, that is dangerous. There was a white guy in Arizona quite a few years back that was doing sweat lodge ceremonies, charging lots of money for sweat lodge. He wasn't trained in how to do it. Didn't go through this, because with a lot of ceremonial stuff and things that you have, there's certain things you have to do to be allowed spiritually to do those things. And if you don't, you run problems. This guy ended up killing a bunch of people in his sweat lodge.
Oh,
He
wow.
refused to let them get out of the sweat lodge because they were going to break the sacred circle. Any ceremonies like that I've been around, when you're done, you get out.
Right.
But a bunch of people died, and that is cultural appropriation. You know what I mean? When
Mm-hmm.
he's doing something to make money off of native culture, wearing a shirt, wearing a little bag that you bought, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's a completely different thing. That is not, to me, cultural appropriation. I make jokes about it. Me and my wife are in Walmart all the time, see the native patterns. Oh, cultural appropriation. But I'm meaning it more in a concept of a joke, you
Right.
know, because one, I am not easily offended by anything that people say or do. You know what I mean? Because I have my own mind and I'm secure in my own cultural identity, you know? So, you know, I tend to sometimes look at people who are upset about everything and go, what are you so insecure about?
Right.
Why do you need to have a fight? Or, you know, look, some people scream cultural appropriation. I go, oh, look at them, you know, virtue signaling to the world how Indian they are because they've got a white person they're mad at. So that gives them an identity. And identity doesn't come from things outside of us. You know what I mean? It comes from the spirit and our connection to the world around us. So cultural appropriation is another weird subject for me because I see it in a much more focused concept than other people do. Other people, cultural, you know, appropriation is if you know, I don't know, have a backpack that has a Southwestern design on it, all of a sudden you're, you know, the white devil that's coming to take the land. And I don't, that is not that way. You know what I mean? You know, it's when people try to claim to know something and it's their own twist on what they think they know of the truth, that's
Right.
appropriation. If, you know, cultural appropriation is, oh, I don't know, not being honest about what Thanksgiving's all about, or, you know, the term Indian, you know, not, you know, not educating yourself on that term particularly, not because you used it, because it just struck a chord with me there, because, you know, what was it, Columbus looking for India and all that crap? It wasn't called India then. He wasn't looking for India.
Right.
You know, the country was called Hindustan at the time. You know what I mean? So appropriation is tearing down the fabric of indigenous culture and identity. And you, as a Caucasian person wearing a damn turtle medicine bag, doesn't mean crap to me. You know, if I saw you and didn't know you, and we happened to, because I'm not going to come up to you and say anything regardless. It's
Right.
not my place. My opinion's not so important. But if you said, you know, saw me and went, hey, look at my bag. I mean, oh, do you know what it's used for? You know what the
Right.
turtle means? Do you know what all these things? Do you honor it in a way? Because you don't have to be native to honor something. Being Caucasian doesn't preclude you from being able to believe in the spirits in the way that the indigenous people believe in it. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's all about, are you honoring it or is it just a trinket for you to look cool?
Right.
Because that's 99% of what is cultural appropriation is. People just want to look cool. They want to look different than, say, their Caucasian friends. They want to be the one with the information. Look at me, I'm cool and edgy. I know things, and have people look at them and go, ooh, oh, you're so cool. You know all this stuff. And they're doing it for themselves.
Right.
So that's kind of my opinion on that.
Okay. So let's see. So how do you think different tribes are doing with like maintaining their heritage, but also engaging with society outside of the like reservations?
That a lot of tribes are doing fairly well with it. Some, you know, it all depends on, like I said, I've hung around a lot of tribes, you know, and I've always said this and always believe this, that too much trying to engage in modern dominant society will damage indigenous, you know, identity. It happens. I have yet to see, you know, like somebody goes to college, you know, one of the old, I want to say it was Iroquois guy named Red, or what is it, Red Jacket or something like that. He made the comment about sending, you know, some of their young men to go to college back in like the 1700s, 1800s, and they came back and he said they didn't know how to hunt anymore. They didn't speak the language right. They didn't feel the earth. They knew how to, you know, tie a tie though, and that made them essentially useless people. You know, you can't serve two masters, is my opinion. And if you go to college or, you know, engage in that, you need to engage in something that enriches your tribe. You know, don't go out for a business degree so you can run a Macy's.
Right.
You're just going to get swallowed up, because part of tribal identity is that societal connection. You know what I mean? You know, I don't believe there's any such thing as a lone Indian. You know, your society makes part of who you are because you are held to certain standards by your societal peers. So who you hang around with the most, you know, is depending on the dog you hang out with, depends on what kind of fleas you're going to get, as we say down here. All right. You know what I mean? And that's really the long and short of it. You hang around in a non-indigenous way of things, you're going to start losing that indigenous identity. You know, I believe if you want to modernize things, bring industry to the reservation. Don't go off the reservation to find industry. Bring jobs or create jobs somehow on the reservation. And the biggest key to that is for people on the reservation and tribal governments to maybe quit asking Mother May I to the United States government, just do what they're going to do without asking the government for help, because the United States government has no interest in helping any type, not just natives, but any minority group in this country.
Right, which is evident in everything
Right,
happening. Yeah.
right. There's nothing, and that's both sides of it. Democrats, Republicans, they're all evil to me. You know what I mean? They're all government. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, they have their best interests for themselves. You know what I mean? They're the only thing they're interested in society is keeping us all arguing with each other instead of actually sitting down and having a conversation with each other and having some critical thinking going on.
Mm-hmm.
So that messes with my friends, because I live here in the South, and I'm definitely not a Republican, but I'm definitely not a Democrat. I'm not a liberal or a conservative. You know what I mean?
You're just a people. Yeah.
I'm a free thinker.
Yeah.
So, and the problem is everybody wants to pick a side because it gives them a tribe to belong to. It's our problem in the world today. We have way too many tribes. You know what I mean? You got white redneck tribes, you got, black inner city tribes, you've got, LGBTQ tribes, you've got all these different tribes, and they identify themselves by that and find ways, because the world is crushed on them. They find ways to go, because I'm part of this group, this is what makes me better than your group. And there we have the fighting, and the government definitely keeps that moving.
So like, how do you think people could support some of the different indigenous tribes, and are there groups or organizations you think that they could look into?
Well, I mean, there's different groups. Really, you contact the tribe, and they usually have outreach programs that people off the reservation can donate money. They can come out, like on Pine Ridge Reservation, people come out every year and bring building materials and people with labor skills, and they come out and they'll help teach the youth how to frame a house, how to put in a window, how to do plumbing and stuff like that. And they'll, in the process of teaching it, they do the work to help better the housing and stuff, because the housing on reservations, the majority of reservations, is awful.
Right.
Yeah, makes my place, and my place is a 30-year-old trailer that's falling apart and the siding's peeling off of it. You know what I mean? And my place is still a palace compared to some of the stuff I've seen people living in, on the reservation.
Yeah, literal tar paper shack.
Yeah, literal tar paper shack.
So it's like teach a man to fish, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the best way to do it. And by educating oneself, not to the convenient point, but way beyond it. You know what I mean? Educate yourself, research, read the books, watch the TV, see the documentaries, and then be brave enough to endure maybe a little anger or resentment that you're around, but go to a reservation, meet the people who still live the life, and sit down and do what it takes to become friends with them. You know what I mean? And earn their trust a little bit, and actually learn the reality of it, of what it is to be an indigenous person, of what it means, and what the history means to us, and what our hopes for the future are. That's the best way to support right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, money, yeah, throwing money to the reservation, that's one thing, but unless you're donating to an individual family, a lot of that money goes through tribal government, and that's not good, because the key word in tribal government is government. You know what I mean? And so everybody's gonna, little corn, getting pecked out by the chickens as it goes down the line. You put 20 pieces of corn in there, you got 15 chickens in government. 5 pieces of corn get to the damn people by the time it's over. So, the best way to do it is, donate directly to families. If you feel like giving money is what you can do best, and do that. Find out, collect clothes. We've done clothing drives. You know what I mean? Non-perishable food drives, blanket drives, stuff like that, to send up to the reservation. Coats for the kids. Go to good, school supplies. You know what I mean? My uncle on Pine Ridge, he was a bus driver for the Head Start up there. And so, because we don't live there on the reservation, we would send ridiculous amounts of school supplies for those kids, because I think the teachers had like a $15 a year budget.
Right.
Given by the government, $15 a year for, 100 kids to buy craft supplies.
Right.
So, we would go around and find anything we could anytime we're out. So I'd tell people, do that. You know what I mean? Find things you can donate to the tribe, because if you donate a bunch of jackets, tribal government can't make any money off them jackets.
Right.
And usually those go through organizations other than governmental. Tribal council doesn't have much to do with that. That's usually individuals on the reservation who set up collection points.
Right. So like talk to people and be like, hey, what do you guys need? What
Exactly.
tangible items can we give you to help you?
Yep, because tangible items go a lot further. You can't get depressed and go out and buy a fifth of, Mad Dog or something with a jacket.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
The jacket's going to be used for your kid like it needs to be.
Right.
Yes.
And even if you got old spare clothes, I mean, they don't even have to be the best condition. You send that stuff up there. The elders, the grandmas, they make quilts.
Right.
Make beautiful star quilts and all this other stuff. So, whatever you can spare, that's what I tell people to do. Educate yourself about the reality of Indigenous people. Actually have that conversation. Be willing to endure maybe a little resentment or a little distrust. You know what I mean? Don't take it personally. What's the name of the book, dear? Neither Wolf Nor Dog?
Mm-hmm. Neither Wolf Nor Dog on Forgotten Roads with an Indian Elder.
Yep. Neither Wolf Nor Dog on Forgotten Roads by an Indian elder. The guy's name is Kent Nurburn. Kent Nurburn is the writer. That book is probably I would suggest that to every non-Indigenous person to read.
Because
okay.
It shows you how to be a good ally.
It shows that book shows you how to be a great ally.
Okay. Yeah.
To Indigenous people.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to add that.
In a non-confrontational manner.
Yeah, like my wife said, it presents. I've sat and talked with my wife about issues, and it inevitably comes out to me attacking almost. You know what I mean? Caucasian people, because I get wrapped up. Yeah, I get angry because of what's happened. That book puts those same issues in a way that people can, because the book is told from this man's perspective of these Native people dealing with him. So it's not directed at the reader.
Right.
The reader's a third party in the whole thing, as opposed to one of the party. And you're not in the conversation when you're reading the book. So it doesn't tend to, rah, 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 bad white person. It doesn't tend to do that to you. It's rah, rah, rah to another white person.
Right. Rah, rah, rah to the things that have happened. Yes.
Right. And, and it addresses that concept of, dismissive ideology and,
where one of the guys is talking about where I'd rather be seen as a drunken Indian because at least I'm being seen as a man than as the wise Indian because that's just a concept.
Yep. There's a part in the book where the white guy is commenting on this drunk Indian youth that comes into a little place where they're eating breakfast. And the guy gives him some money and he's like, oh, he goes on in that stereotype of drunk Indians. And one of the other guys says, I'd rather be seen as a drunk Indian than the wise, elder from the 1800s, because at least I'm seen as a human being right now, a living, real, textured human being.
Right.
And that is real deep. You know what I mean? It's very deep concept.
So you talked a little bit about, then the money can't be used to buy some Mad Dog. So like there have been tons of studies done about how, drug and alcohol abuse in the reservations. Why do you think that's so high?
Oh, that's easy. That goes back to the 1930s when you had the Reorganization Act for the reservation system, when the Native American people were out farming all the farmers in the Great Plains areas after they were first put on the reservations, and the farmers got together and lobbied, gave money to Congress, and Congress created this concept of just put them on welfare and don't allow them to do this anymore because these white farmers who have lots of money, they're not making money now and we're not getting our campaign contributions. So the people found a way to have pride rather than, okay, they couldn't go out and count coup on an enemy anymore. They couldn't steal horses anymore. They couldn't go out and hunt buffalo and feed their people anymore. So they found a different way to be competitive because Indigenous nature is to establish who you are. There are clear-cut lines of identity. A warrior is a warrior. There's a clear-cut man's role, a clear-cut woman's role. There's even clear-cut roles for transgender people in a lot of the tribes. You know what I mean? But these were clear-cut roles. You didn't get to have an opinion of how you filled that role. You know what I mean? So you took pride in what you did. You know what I'm saying? And you kind of chose what you did. You weren't forced to do one thing or another, but you would be, based on your livelihood and how you did things and your personality, you would gravitate towards something. Having something like that or not having it, I should say, is why all this is going on. They have no purpose. They don't. They oh God, man, I almost get mad about that. There's no opportunity on the reservation. And the only opportunity there is on the reservation is to leave the reservation, which is counterproductive to being around your society that gives you the identity of being an indigenous person.
Right.
Either stay here and starve with no opportunity, or go find opportunity and starve your soul of its culture.
Right.
What needs to happen, like I said, you want to stop alcoholism and drug abuse on the reservation, and the high rates of violence and teen suicide, and youth pregnancy, and poverty, and all these things. Bring again, either the people need to band together and take what little they got and start one little step at a time to build industry and build something that people can be proud of on the reservation. Government doesn't want proud indigenous people, because proud indigenous people claim their rights. They proclaim who they are. They say, this is ours. Here's who we are. We have a history and we need a future.
Right.
And the government doesn't want that, because that's a loss of control.
Broken people is an easy to control.
Yeah, broken people are easy to control.
Right.
They don't want Native people who are willing to fight. And I don't mean fight by writing letters. I mean Native people who are willing to get up, and crack you in the head, with a stick, you know what I mean?
Right.
Or, put a bullet in your nugget because you went screwing up on the reservation.
Right.
And doing stuff that destroys a legacy of a people that, even if you believe the scientific crap about land bridge, then they've been here 50,000 years. So what needs to happen is stuff that brings pride back, that people can take pride. They can go, I earned this, I did this.
Right.
You know what I mean? I created this, and that'll bring back that pride, because proud people don't have to dive into a bottle or snort something or shoot something in their arms, because they have self-worth.
Right.
Alcoholism and drug abuse all stems at its initial using point from a lack of self-worth.
Right. One thing we had talked about, and because also another thing we're doing is like wanting to like write letters to different senators, do different things, be helpful. Is like the idea of, especially out in the Grand Plains area, like what if there were solar farms put up around the reservation, you know what I mean, that then they could take care of. Now, obviously, like they could say, hey, not this land, but do it on this, you know what I mean? And then that would bring jobs to the reservation, and still.
Yeah. I think solar farms.
Like it's in the land right outside of it, but it's still close enough that you can be like, hey, we're in charge of, making sure this works. Helping,
if there were a company out there that would do that, or a way to force Congress to allow that, or do something where that could be a thing, that would be great. You know what I mean? Because again, that renewable energy is an important concept right now, because fossil fuels are a finite thing. There are eventually, if it's not in our lifetime, it's going to be in somebody's lifetime in the near future, that fossil fuel is going to be a non-viable way to power the world.
Right.
So we need to invest and, look at these other options. And I think setting something like that up where it could create a job market, an ability for people to get their foot in the door of higher education, because, a lot of those things require degree type jobs, or
like a training program that came with the company. Like here's like, okay, you're going to be a mechanic. Here are the things you need to know how to do.
And here's the damn, skill tree that gets you to that level of proficiency to have that job. I agree with that 100%.
And then again, partner with like local schools with like a trade program, so that, you can take the kids that are 16, 17, 18 and be like, hey, we've already got these jobs. Here's some, in-demand skills for if you don't come work for us, at least in our industry.
Yep. And that's, that's the issue. And the only reason there's not a lot of that is because the situation is created among not just but in minority people, a victim mentality.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so they feel, and the government has monopolized and capitalized on the concept of, because you're victimized, you're owed something. And people spend all their time fighting about what somebody owes them, rather than going, what the hell with it? I don't care who owes me what, I'm going to do for me, and I'm going to make this from the ground up. And they're missing that point. You know what I mean? So, trade school and stuff like that, that would be great. That's the type of thing that if an ally, for lack of a better term, came to the reservation and said, you know what, I'll teach your people how to do this. I will help do this. The problem is everybody keeps seeking help from the United States government, and that's the wrong move.
Right.
That's like me, coming to your house and punching you in the head every day, and then you asking me to defend you from being punched in the head.
Right. I think more nonprofits would be the way to go, as opposed to the government.
Yep, nonprofit groups, private, organizations, you know what I mean?
Maybe lean away from the church too.
Yeah, lean away from the church too, because the church always comes with strings. Churches, I can teach you this, but you got to sit in our, sermon.
Right.
The church has nothing good for Indigenous people. That's been another huge problem on the reservation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I remember what
Well,
your
and
uncle
that's
said,
also
like, they get
because,
in cases of Bibles and not like kids' picture books, which they actually need.
Yeah,
right. They,
a
that's
5-year-old doesn't need the Bible.
right. Give a 5-year-old like an alphabet book, like,
Right. Something that,
whatever. Exactly. Yeah. And that
Yeah.
is definitely a problem with the churches is they're like, we'll help you, but you need to do what we say, which then takes away the cultural identity of the
exactly.
people they're trying to help.
And
Yep.
their autonomy.
Yep. Like if you want to help people, you should just help people no matter what their
Yeah, do
beliefs
the
are.
right thing because it's the right thing to do. I've always hated the concept, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, what if you're a crazy person and you don't mind somebody, I don't know, chopping your fingers off?
Right.
Technically, by that rule, you can do unto others as you would have them do to you. I say
Mm-hmm.
do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because it's going to come back to you. I hate that concept too. If you do something because you want somebody to do that for you, it's a self-interest story. All the spiritual energy of it being decent is taken away. Do the right thing because you have the ability to do it.
Right.
And let it stop there. Don't seek thanks. Just do it and do what needs to be done.
Definitely. Okay, so then my last question for you is, so how would you want to, just at any grade or whatever, how do you think it would be helpful to change the school system and teaching about Native American history? A lot of times they're like, oh, the Indians and the Pilgrims got together and had Thanksgiving and everything was great. And are there certain things we should portray different? I mean, I know that like in middle school and stuff, they talk about Trail of Tears, but there's like a paragraph on it and it's like this happened, but not like all the troubles that went through it. What put different tribes in the situations they're in, and at what age do you think maybe conversations should occur about how history's been whitewashed and neglects different minority groups?
As far as the age group, I'd say about middle school.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? About middle school is when you can start, because you can't have the conversation about Indigenous history like the Trail of Tears or Thanksgiving or the Sand Creek Massacre or Fort Wilderness or any of these other that I can go on and on and on about.
Right.
You know what I mean? I even on one of my albums have a friggin' spoken word piece that we released. You know what I mean? That talks about all these different massacres, from South America to Canada. You know what I mean? But you can't have the conversation and not talk about the atrocities. It
Right.
can't be done. You know what I mean? It's one thing. Well, a lot of people, didn't make it on the Trail of Tears. You can say, or you can go over half the people died of starvation and freezing to death because the soldiers didn't allow them to have good food and they didn't allow them to have jackets. You can't tell the story about how one soldier on the Trail of Tears gave an elderly woman who was carrying her grandchild a jacket, and the soldier was taken and shot for disobeying orders because he dared give one of these dirty ass Cherokee a jacket. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I understand that's inappropriate for little bitty kids, but middle school, I mean, these kids are playing friggin', Fallout and Call of Duty.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
They need a reality check. And the way you don't whitewash them is you tell the absolute truth, no matter how ugly it is.
Right.
And that's the problem we've got now. Stereotypes, dumbass portrayals, of characters in television and on movies, and it leads to people like, jumping you just for wearing a damn outfit.
Right.
You know what I mean? You weren't
Or
claiming to be native. You weren't doing anything. It was a part, and people need to understand it and have a little sympathy about that kind of thing. At least you're aware of Pocahontas.
right.
You know what I mean?
And
Now,
her actual true story, I've looked that up since I was 4. I
right,
want to.
right. But see, you did exactly what I said. You found information, you liked it, and then you looked up the truth and you dug for the truth. That is how you be a perfect ally, and that is how you fight cultural appropriation and everything else, because you can say, hey, I understand this story, I understand what it's about. This is just something when I was a child who had no concepts of I have to think a certain way. You were just a child, a ball of innocence. And that's
Right.
something that brought you happiness. In a modern world where the world is a piece of crap to people now, and everything is stress and jobs and money, and oh my God, what's going to happen is,
It's like if it
war.
brings you happiness and doesn't hurt anybody else, then
Right. And somebody claiming that you wearing that outfit is hurting them, sorry, and I know this is being recorded, they're an idiot.
right.
that is being overly sensitive. Okay, their offense at that point is not your problem. You get what I'm saying? It's not your problem, because
Right.
you're not going out and you're not saying, one, this is authentic. You know, it's a costume. Somebody goes, oh, that's cool. You can say, yeah, it's a Pocahontas thing from when I was a kid. And then that can lead to the conversation about the reality of Pocahontas. And then that can
Right.
lead to the reality of Indigenous. See, there's a path that can be taken rather than stopping right there at white girl, don't do that, blah. You know what I mean?
Right.
I hate that crap, because you lose an opportunity for education.
Definitely. Yeah. So thank you for taking this time. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and I'm meeting with multiple people from different tribes. I know one from another Lakota tribe I'm doing, and a few other things. So I'm just trying to get, a view from lots of different people and
Mm-hmm.
input.
And realize, the viewpoints will be different, because some people were raised entirely on a reservation. I was raised between a reservation and out here in the deep South. You know what I
Right.
mean? I'm also a mixed blood person. You know what I mean? So, I have a different concept of things. I was raised in a different world than a reservation person or the urban Indian who never
Right.
saw the reservation. There's all kinds of different viewpoints. You know what I mean? And you have human nature involved in those things too, where somebody, it's so different. There's no one unified or cemented concept of Indigenous ideology,
Mm-hmm.
and you really want to have some fun and watch what people do, take some time to talk to some of these people and go, well, one of my other, interviewees said this, and watch them go, that person doesn't know what they're talking about, without knowing the other person.
Right.
It's really funny, because I'd never say, you can tell me all the stuff other people said, and I tell you, well, that's, their worldview. That is their experience. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of psychology involved in it too. I'm a freak for psychology.
No, thank you so much. And I like that you had different history things that you could bring up and all that. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for all your information. It's really
Yeah.
helpful. So thank you so much.
Yep. I appreciate you having me on there. Let you say see you to Dana.
See ya. Bye.